A transmissão está começando. Todos os participantes estão no modo somente escuta.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to DelphiCon2020. This is the last panel of the conference, last chance for you to ask your questions and get together as a Delphi community. Today we'll be talking about using Delphi in the education sphere with Victory, Brandon, David, and Bertie. So for introductions, we'll start with Victory.
So hi there, I'm Victory Fernandes. Most of my friends call me Vic, so welcome. And I'm an engineer. I have been working all my life with Delphi and also teaching Delphi and C at the university, mostly for engineers too. So I have a very deep understanding on desktop computing and software development, but also for microcontrollers. All kinds of microcontrollers, 851, PIC, Arduino, both in assembler and C. So I always like to put together these two words, and here we are, trying to spread the word and bring Delphi into the universities.
Great, thank you, Victory. Brandon.
I'm Brandon Long. I'm a teacher in South Africa. I started programming as a student when I was at school, and we started with Pascal back in the day. And then, I started teaching in 2003, and I've been teaching ever since. I enjoy it. I've been to New Zealand for a little bit as well. But I really enjoy teaching kids Delphi. Well, we call it Delphi, but Delphi, So we really try to give high school kids, which is like age 16 to 18, we really try to give them the fundamentals so that they get like quite a good head start when they go into universities to be able to pursue a career in programming. So we really like to give them those foundations in school. Yeah.
Awesome. David.
David I here. I hope people remember me. I spent over 30 years at Borland and Cogear and Embarcadero, and then went off to do some research, and now I'm doing projects and writing and just programming every day for fun, both in Delphi and in C++ Builder. I've spent over 30 years on an industry advisory board for the Computer Science and Software Engineering Department at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and there we try to help guide the faculty and the curriculum and students to be prepared to go out and work in industry and give feedback to the department. At the same time, many departments here in the US are driven by curriculum standards that are connected to accreditation programs that help guide what requirements are done, not necessarily programming languages, but just the technologies and techniques and learning at an undergraduate level. There are also standards here in the US or guidance for curriculums for kindergarten through high school or secondary school. And so keeping track of what's happening and evolving in those areas. And then finally, in my years of traveling, I don't know, over 4 million miles, I visited a lot of colleges, universities, high schools, students, talked to a lot of professors, and it's always great to see the young minds getting involved in computing and where they might want to go in their future as far as jobs, industries, and other things. So it's great to be among educators and technologists here on this panel.
Awesome. And finally, Bertie.
Yes, I'm Bertie Buitendag, and my first experience with Delphi was in 1996 when I was a second-year student at our Technikon, it's like technical university, and I grew into love with the language from the beginning. I once attended when Delphi 2 was launched and a demonstration at one of these computer centers and IT expositions, and what amazed me was that they the presenter at that stage, I couldn't remember who it was, they actually compiled Delphi out of the Delphi compiler, the Delphi 2 compiler. And that amazed me. And then they also introduced the ADO dataset components and the T, and that just really blew my mind. And ever since, I've been an avid Delphi supporter, especially for education. And then later on at our own university, they told us, all right, you were taught Delphi, but now when you do your final year project, you must do it in a language that we haven't been taught, you know, as part of the classes. And at that stage, C++ Builder came out, and it was the obvious choice for us. The lecturers didn't know, and we made it in C++ Builder, and that was okay for them. So the learning curve wasn't that much. At our own university, I'm involved at the Tshwane University of Technology. We're a big, large residential university in South Africa. We've been teaching and using Embarcadero as a teaching tool, starting off from Borland, going on to CodeGear, ever since 1995. So Delphi or either C++ has been presented at our university up until now. So we are going strong in that regard. We currently use C++ Builder with our students, but that's the platform that we use. My involvement with schools came in 2003 when we did a community workshop with teachers. And in those days in South Africa, the Delphi just became popular, and it was rolled out to some schools, and schools could still decide what they want to do in information technology. And there were some provinces in our country that decided, no, they would like to go to Delphi and try to give Delphi a chance. And I was involved with some teacher training, and about 40 teachers came for a short course, and I met some of them there. And from there on, my love for the education division and the high school teachers and all that, the whole sector became evident. And I really have a passion for those. I mean, I don't think that teachers are appreciated enough for what they try to do, because an IT teacher at the school is predominantly the network administrator, the go guy for everything IT related. So that often happens. I've been an avid supporter with Delphi, and I've met David a few times, and I've just once, and I met and when Glenn Wiley came over, so that was wonderful. And in 2011, Glenn came to South Africa, and he made a very, very big announcement. That is after I've been to San Francisco, and I went up to Embarcadero's head offices, and I spoke to the people over there saying, oh, can we please have a Delphi educational type of license or agreement? And they didn't really understand the concept at that time. But when Glenn Wiley came, he announced that we could have Delphi 2010 for our secondary schools. And that was a joyful day for me to have a good and solid compiler available, because at that stage, everybody used the cracked version of Delphi 7. There may still be some schools using Delphi 7. So I'm very passionate about the language as a whole, and I think it has a lot of potential for education. That's my involvement.
Great, thank you for the introductions. As a reminder for the attendees, this panel is here to answer your questions, so please post them in chat and we'll moderate through them. First question we have is really more of a statement, but it says that the free community version of Rad Studio is not enough to demonstrate full Delphi functionality. So trainers obviously want to demonstrate everything that Delphi can do, but the licenses are expensive. Can any of you talk to ways to overcome this, or maybe use like third parties to get around some of the licensing functionality locks?
Yeah, so I read this question, and for me, it's a day-to-day fight. I remember the time that we did not even have a free version of Delphi to teach. So nowadays, users can even count on it and use most of it. And even for students, we are able to, to train them in all the logics that are involved in most of the disciplines, the basic disciplines in the curriculum, both in computer science, computer engineering, or any other engineering first semester, second semester training. So, of course, it will never be enough, but we're always fighting for more. But for what we have now, yes, we can do a lot of things. A lot can be done.
Yeah, and I think the community edition and the academic edition that goes out, especially looking at what we do in most high school curriculum, looking at the British curriculum, the American standards, what's given out there is quite sufficient to cover, and to cover the content of many curricula out there for high schools. And I think even for universities, it's quite sufficient. But as you say, you always get people that want to do more, and as Victory just mentioned, for sure you will always want to have more and show more.
Yeah, I would just chime in to say that, depending on the course in high school or college, there are features in the community edition, the free community edition, that are perfect for teaching the fundamentals of programming, whether that's algorithms, logic, data structures. I know Vic in his session earlier this week talked about how he's using Delphi in different types of courses, not necessarily just hardcore computer science or hardcore software engineering, but in electrical engineering and other things. And so with the combination, I think, of the community edition as well as through Get to get some specialized types of components and or libraries and sample projects through GitHub are great ways to combine things. Again, of course, if it's a course in deploying RAD server, which needs something more than what's in the community edition, besides locally or distributed databases or other kinds of things, there's always going to be topics in certain advanced courses where something more will be needed. But I always encourage, and still encourage today, professors, teachers, consultants, trainers, and others to work with the local distributor and or local marketer offices to see what is possible for special offerings for a specific course. This happened with a biomedical and medical device course in Italy a couple years ago, where they needed a little bit more to be able to connect to all sorts of medical devices. And so there was a special, for the run of that course, set of licenses that would expire as soon as the course was done. So, always encouraged to work with Embarcadero and with local distributors and partners to see what more can be done for the university courses. And again, going back to the early days in South Africa, there was a special deal because the whole country made a decision that Delphi should be used in the computer classes in lower education, right, Brandon and Bertie? It was not the high big university type courses, but it was get those students early on learning about computer application technologies and development, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, in South Africa, we start teaching programming in grade 10, which is basically the age 16. We've done that for numerous of years. So it's basically giving students the fundamentals that they need in programming. So the programming languages that, or the Delphi that we use, the features that are available are more than sufficient. You might find there might be the occasional student that is the whiz kid that wants to expand. And even that, there's still many features that those students can use that can challenge them. Obviously, there's a big trend worldwide that we are moving towards more coding in education. We find many younger students in primary schools that are starting some sort of coding. So where we usually have kids experiencing coding for the first time at age 16, some of them are now starting to get that a lot earlier. So as time goes on, hopefully we'll get more features that will be more challenging, but for now it's definitely sufficient enough from what I've experienced.
Awesome. I just realized my mind completely jumped off track and you have slides to run through. So let's step through those and then we can continue answering questions from the audience. Bertie, if you'd like to present yours.
Yes, I'd like you to scroll on for me. I think we did pass the introductory stage, so we can go to the next slide. And the next slide is just to tell the world out there what we do in South Africa. As Brandon just elaborated for us, we basically start off in grade 10, that is your 15 to 16-year-old kids, and that will progress up until grade 12. And that is the end of their secondary education before they move over into tertiary education at university. And what we basically do is your typical type of problem-solving stuff, your introductory programming constructs and constructs, looking at different types of components and events, and also kindling, you know, the typical constructs like looping, conditional constructs, working a little bit with interaction, and so forth. And then as we go and progress to grade 11 and grade 12, we incorporate database elements, and then in also more object orientation. So at the end of grade 12, our students are exposed to database connectivity. We're using Access as a database just for conformity, and they can connect to a database, run SQL queries, extract data from a data set, and then we also introduce them how to create and instantiate their own user-defined classes. And that's the type of applications we develop, and in a nutshell, what our curriculum entail. And I see that it's quite in line with what they're doing in the UK, and also what they are currently doing, I see in some schools in Brazil. I browsed a little to see what the focus is. So I was quite happy about that. And then, yeah, so that is what we do. And in the next slide, if we can continue to the next slide. When a school or a country wants to go into using Delphi, for example, we must just get something straight. As Brandon said, Delphi is just a tool. It's really just a tool to kindle the learner's enthusiasm and to get him or her to go further into studies at tertiary level. So under all the nerds out there will never ever be consensus about what is the best approach or what is the best programming language to use. That's not our objective. But I think the purpose of the subject should be that the subject should drive the use and the tool should support the purpose. And for that, the language is a means to an end. And Delphi, for me, in that regard, is one of the best tools out there. Not just for major application development like Victory has shown us, but also as an educational tool. And if you want to roll out something like this, you really need some teacher support and buy-in, and you need learner support and buy-in, that they know that why are we learning the following constructs, why is it important for us. In the next slide, why I support Delphi, for me, it's, as I said, it's a great language. The syntax is student-friendly. Our learners and students get to create applications in the operating system environment that they're used to. When Victory had his talk, he's shown why would you go and show technologies that's 40, 50 years old, a console-based screen, when you can simulate certain things for a student, for instance, a mathematical equation where they can see it. Because our focus in South Africa is information technology and not pure computer science, we also have a big focus on database connectivity. And we all know that Delphi, it's irrefutable, is the best programming language to connect to any database just like that. And that's why I really support it. And it's easy because it hides the inner complexities of connecting to a database. So for teachers, they can show how the connection take place. The students have the data in front of them, and they could perform that as part of their problem-solving operations. And very important also, easy visualization. For high school learners, I think visualization is an important thing for any type of person learning programming. And one of the things that really iterates or really illustrates the use of, for example, a conditional and an iterational construct is the while not end of file principle when we iterate through a data set. If you have a DB grid on it and that database pointer moves, or the record pointer moves up and iterates through, the learner can see it and it's visual for him or her. And that really encapsulates the idea. And we spoke about it a little bit. It gives, if we do a certain curriculum in Delphi, there is the opportunity for the students that wants to go beyond the curriculum to go further beyond the curriculum and stimulate themselves. And I think that was my last slide from my side. Yes, there was a question on what textbooks and stuff do we use in South Africa. There is some links to textbooks. Brandon also has a site there. And I saw some links that David had in a document today about the British schools and a British textbook that is available for AS and A level computer science. So those links will surely help people to obtain the textbooks, the kind of ones we use in South Africa. And I think that's the end of my slides.
I'll just chime in real quick, Brandon, just for a moment, because Bertie just mentioned it. I put into the chat a couple of URLs pointing to Kevin Bond, who is listening in, and posted a sort of comment question in the question log about, in the earlier days before the community edition, it was hard to convince teachers in the UK as part of a high school program or secondary education program. But then once the community edition came out, it allowed the schools to install it and use it, and also the students could use that edition at home. And in the UK, schools really have a choice of, I think it's 5 different languages. They can choose, C#, Java, Delphi, Python. He was mentioning that Python has taken has moved up quite a bit. VB.net was the other one that they could choose. There was choice of 5 different languages by teachers in the classes. So I wanted to make sure that I put those links in the chat window for everybody as well. And Kevin, thanks for sitting in on this session today as well. Keep up the great work that you're doing and the books that you're working on in the UK.
Yeah.
I totally should have invited Kevin to be on the panel. My mistake, sorry. We'll do another one with you, Kevin. Brandon.
Yes. Yeah, if you go to my slide, just regarding, it's just basically a quote. But we took the curriculum. We basically made the curriculum and looked at what is it that we want to accomplish. So we don't teach Delphi, we teach programming and problem solving. So when people say, why you teach it? We don't teach Delphi, we teach programming and problem solving. And Delphi is the tool that helps us do that. So we had like when the panels did this checklist of what is it that we want to accomplish in our curriculum, they took a whole bunch of programming languages, and Delphi was the one that met the majority of the criteria. And part of that criteria is not just teaching fundamentals, but also just to spark that passion for programming. So if we have students and they can see the program that matches what they see on their normal computer, if students can see a database connection, because most systems have some sort of information management. So being able to do that, there's so much that they can actually do. So by doing that, the students develop those fundamentals, and Delphi has been the tool that helps us do it. It teaches the key fundamentals. It teaches good style, and it allows them to be able to experiment with programming in the beginning. And we find the learning curve for students that they tend to grasp it a lot better. There's just a natural nuance to Delphi that allows them to be able to get those skills. I have many students, and I include myself. When I was at school, I did computer science at the time. It was called computer science at the time, and we did programming as well. And when we went to university, the lecturers told us that we don't actually have to attend lectures, we just have to attend practicals, even though the programming language was different. And that's because at school we had learned the fundamentals. I have lots of my older students come to me and they say that they have made it so much easier to cope at university, where they go at a much higher pace. And sometimes a student just needs that little bit of extra experience which they get from school, which helps them get that foundation, which they can cope a lot better at university. And they don't necessarily learn Delphi at university, but they've got those fundamentals. They know how looping works. They know how selection statements work, and that's the crux. If you've got those fundamentals, you can use that in any of the programming languages. And we don't want to teach necessarily programmers that only know one language. They must be able to migrate to all the different languages as long as they've got those basic fundamentals. Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree, and even that's what I tried to show at my speech earlier 2 days ago, because actually they get to the university so young, and then we throw at them, I don't know what, Dev C++, console screens, and then we want to teach the basics. So why don't we teach the basics, showing them how to do a loop and implement something for their iPhone, for the Android, and do something that they can see and actually feel the vibe. So that's the point. So that's exactly what I tried to do. And actually there was a question here asking about Java when parents and other teachers say, okay, but we have to teach Java to them. And I say, yes, let us teach all the languages, but not be restrict and thinking only about Java, for example. And that's how I usually try to convince my colleagues in engineering. Say, okay, you don't like Delphi, you don't like Pascal, no problem. So let us teach them C++ Builder, and we teach C, but with C++ Builder and not Dev C. And then they can do the same and learn the same, but actually doing something useful, and that they can actually speed up in the curve and actually learn the passion and then learn for themselves, because that's the point. So I totally agree with you. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Yes, what I would like to present, and then there are some questions here. I've been typing and trying to answer too many questions. But anyway, I would like to present some numbers from the academic program in Brazil, because actually from my speech 2 days ago, I got some questions asking about institutions using the Delphi in Brazil, about numbers. So we have some numbers here. So these are numbers presented in Embarcadero Conference Brazil. First of all, for you guys that do not know, Brazil has the biggest Delphi event in the world. So since, I don't know, 10, 20 years, we are doing events every year. And I'm speaking in this event since 2011, and we always have like 600 people every year gathered in São Paulo. So we have a huge community in Brazil, and we are now spreading through to the universities. So nowadays we have 110 public institutions using Delphi for free. So we are talking about free licenses for public universities. And each university receives 15 server licenses plus 100 serial numbers each, okay, that are available for their students. And we have other 500 institutions that we reach through this group called CPS in Brazil. Those are just institutions in São Paulo state. And these guys, they share 500 simultaneous licenses. So we get to a number of 12,000 licenses, free licenses available for students in Brazil. And this is like quite a considerable number that we have now and growing, okay? Just this year, just in 2020, 110 is the total, so, but we got 40 new. So in this 110, we have 40 new universities that we actually invited to the program, and they subscribed to the program this year, even with COVID. So we are growing, okay? Talking about private and institutions, they do use a commercial version. So they do pay for the licenses, and we have 29 institutions nowadays, each institution running a server with 500 simultaneous licenses. So if we multiply that, we got to 14,500 licenses. So we have now in Brazil about 26,000 licenses, more than 26,000 licenses available for students and teachers. So this is a very substantial number that I confirmed with Embarcadero Brazil today. And I mean, that's the way to go, let's say, worldwide, in my opinion, to bring young people each day, okay? We have to give them licenses, of course. We have to empower them with the licenses, but we also need to provide training. So in 2019 and 2020, Embarcadero Brazil will start with this online program for the CPS institution teachers. And there was 2 online training for 40 hours each. And we grew to 10 online training for 40 hours each. All these trainings provided by MVPs, Brazilian MVPs. For those out there that do not know also, we are the country with the biggest number of MVPs worldwide. So Brazil is very strong when it comes to Delphi. And in these 2 years, we have actually trained more than 50 teachers in each of these online trainings. So we got to a number of more than 600 teachers trained in more than 480 hours of training provided by MVPs to these teachers. So it's giving them the licenses, but also giving them more training so they can empower and teach their students. Okay, next slide, please. Actually this year, in 2020, after COVID, we actually launched a new program which is called Universidade Delphi. Okay, we call it Delphi in Brazil too, so Universidade Delphi. Okay, so we actually have, up to the moment, more than 40 videos published. It's a website you can go through, universidadedelphi.com.br, and we have an average of 3 videos posted each week. These videos are can be produced by anyone in the community. You just send the video to the Universidade, and then they decide if they're going to publish it or not. And we have this MVP called Landerson, which is ahead of all this program. It is a fantastic program that started after COVID, and even after COVID, we, up to the moment, have more than 70 teachers subscriptions and almost 500 student subscriptions. Okay, so in these 6 to 7 months, we have more than 33,000 distinct access to this website, and we are providing lots of videos and everything in Brazilian Portuguese, because even that's a big restriction in our country. We don't have lots of English speakers and not even a Spanish speaker. So when the content is in English only, if it's written, okay, we have Google Translator, but if it's video content, it's very hard for the average developer to start working with it. Even in between the MVPs, most probably just me and 2 or 3 other guys are actually able to do a presentation like this fully in English. So it's a limitation in our country, as we are so big. Most people only speak Brazilian Portuguese. So we are trying to create more and more content in Brazilian Portuguese to empower the students and teachers in general. Okay. So this is, for the moment, everything I had to show in terms of numbers, so we can go back to the questions and talk about this.
I just had a couple more thoughts. I didn't make any slides, but I put together some notes. Maybe Jim shared those. I'm not sure. They were just very terse and slightly organized.
Yeah, I did share your notes in the handouts, David, so that people can see them.
They're slightly organized, but not quite. There's a bunch of different links in there, I think, which are good. I put a few again in the chat window, but you get them out of the PDF. One of the things that I did, it was a long time ago, is that I took the feature matrix and tried to map Delphi features to different courses to see how not only the features of the IDE and the runtime library, but of the language itself, because there's always this conversation about, well, how do you fit Delphi into a curriculum, and where should you use? And again, Vic did a great job in his session earlier in DelphiCon2020. So if you didn't sit on that one, you can get the replay and see how he matched capabilities to different types of courses across a wider range than just computer science or computer application technology. And I think, Vic, you also talked about it here, is it comes up is in how do we train the teachers, right? How do we, and if you look at resources for other languages, there's a lot of how to learn to do things, but at the same time, when you're trying to train a teacher who then has to take that learning and turn it into teaching students of a wide range of ages and interests who may go off into different areas, and Brandon talked about some of that, about how, and Bertie, about how this fits into a countrywide and or school district-wide push to get the kids started with computer technology and then move on. And then there's a wide spectrum of these kinds of uses, whether it's teaching some computer science basics, teaching IT, because even IT people, network people, and so on, need to learn some automation, whether they're using, you know, a traditional programming language or they're using some kind of scripting language or shell language or whatever it might be. And so in the UK, they break down if you're going into a technical area where you need to learn some automation versus going into a computer science world where you're going to move on to college. Hi, Jim. Move on to college and then maybe go on to postgraduate work where you need a lot broader base of experiences. There's been conversations for years, and there's questions in there about, in the question log about, well, where are the jobs, you know, and that's what the professors will teach because they want to fulfill a requirement in a certain country, region, or whatever in the skills required. And I think, to me, that note about skills required, and so teaching students how to acquire skills, regardless of the programming language. I mean, Johannes Strustrup and others will tell you, you need to learn multiple programming languages because they all have different aspects to teach you about skills development, regardless of where you're going to end up. So I don't necessarily get caught up, and I don't run into professors and teachers and people in the industry who only say, look, I only want you to ever learn Java, or I only want you to ever learn Python or R or Go or Rust or Dart, or go down the list of all of them. What I want to do is I want to have people learn capabilities, skills, architecture, design, and other things, whether that's user experience or back-end development, you know. And there are lots of ways to do that. There's coding boot camps, there's universities, there's other ways that you can learn to get ready for a career. And you may go work for a company that is using completely different technology and a completely different architecture, but if you've got the fundamentals, regardless of the syntax of a language, then you'll be prepared, the students will be prepared. So, you know, helping teach teachers is a great thing. I think, you know, I'm going to check out this Universidad Delphi, that'll be great. You know, there's learndelphi.org, and maybe there can be a section, Jim, of learndelphi.org where instructional type materials, which are oftentimes similar but yet different, as well as in the academy, by putting not only the information about the course, but some worked examples as well as some projects for the students, and then a self-check or a more formal quiz or test at the end of each module to make sure that the student has learned enough to move on to the next topic or next level. And so there's some subtle differences, and maybe again, Learn Delphi and as well as Universidad Delphi can be examples of what that flow might be. And then I put into the chat log, and it's in that document of Al Manarino, who's a great field software engineer out of Long Island, New York, for Embarcadero, back in 2018, did a session on getting kids coding with IoT, where he showed kids how to use some IoT devices to do interesting and cool things, just to get, you know, younger kids interested in what's going on in this science, technology, you know, math, engineering world that they're going to move into, regardless of whether they're going to be a programmer or a program manager or a server expert, you know. And so those are some thoughts, as well as, I think, Jim, surveying the community, or maybe start with the MVPs about what's being used in each of their countries these days, what curriculums are being followed in their country, their state, their province, their region, so that we collect some of this information to get a better understanding of what more we might be able to provide as a community, as well as, you know, products and licenses and all those normal things. But community edition, you can do so much with the community edition. The students can have it at home. You know, they can use it in the classes. There's no financial revenue border that they'll hit. And it's amazing how much you can do with Delphi, you know, community edition these days. I mean, it's really cool.
Community edition does.
Jim.
Thank you. Delphi Community Edition does support local databases, just not remote databases. So you can do a lot of database stuff with Community Edition. You're really not limited in that regard as far as learning how to work with databases. I think a couple of the comments, I can't remember who said now, I think it was Brandon and Victory both, but the idea that you're learning the concepts and the fundamentals, and you know, you look at most curriculums, even like especially university curriculums, and there'll be a course on languages, right? And that's like, hey, we're going to learn a bunch of different languages and what, you know, what some of the differences are or something like that. But then the rest of the course is really more about the fundamentals and about the things like that. And being able to see your application, I think, is really valuable. And actually, so Adam, who was helping moderate this, he asked him, he said he would share his experience. He is a recent CS grad, and I introduced him to Delphi and C++ Builder, and I loved his reaction. So Adam, if you want to go ahead and share your experience, your impression really quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Not so recent, actually. I graduated from a public university with a computer science degree in 2013. So it's kind of 7 years stale. And then
More
I went
recent than mine.
Yeah. And then I went off to the military and I did something totally different for 7 years. And I'm stepping back into this realm with an internship with Embarcadero. And Victory is like spot on. Everything about my 4-year degree there was command line, command line, command line. Not that that's not great. You can't do a lot with it. I think it just makes it easier for teachers to grade your work. But it's not exactly engaging, or doesn't stimulate the imagination that much. And in 4 years, nobody taught me how to turn my program into an executable, like drag onto Windows desktop, double click it and make it work, which is what I wanted to do. And I just didn't take the time to learn that. But then Jim sat down with me with Rad Studio as a whole. I'm not going to plug just Delphi because I started with C++ Builder, but Rad Studio. And within 5 minutes, we had an app loaded on my phone where I was manipulating text boxes and buttons. And that was a magical moment, you know, seeing something go from just a very simple idea to reality in my hand with a few button presses was amazing. And from that moment on, like, I just had ideas flooding into my brain about what I can do with this. Now that I know the possibilities and I know how broad and extensible this tool is. So Rad Studio as a whole is a really great way to engage learning and make sure that people can just take it beyond the bare minimum that your curriculum requires, you know, through their own efforts.
Yes. Yeah. Honestly, for me, every time I run a program, I design something and run it, and it's like, there it is. And it's like, that was in earlier just in my head, and now it is running and working. It's still magical for me. I've been doing it for a long time. Let's see. Lots of great questions here. A couple of questions about Raspberry Pi. So as of Raspberry Pi 4, and I haven't tested on Raspberry Pi 4, I've tested on Raspberry Pi 3, but Raspberry Pi 4, there is an official Android release for Raspberry Pi 4. And so you can deploy to Android on Raspberry Pi easily. So that could be something to look at. I would love to see ARM Linux support built into Delphi though, but that's not available yet. And then there was a really funny story about
Raspberry Pi. Another thing is that you can run intraweb even with the browser. I used to use it. I had like TVs showing real-time graphics from productions in our factories, and we wanted something very light to be running on the TV just to generate the information. And we used to do intraweb applications and run the browser.
Oh, wow. Okay, that makes sense. So there's a really funny story here, and I'll just summarize it. You should be able to find it in the log if you scroll up. That he was at university and started in C++, but came to his diploma project, and he was introduced to Delphi, and he switched to Delphi. And when he went to present it, they're like, "There's no way you developed this by yourself." And he's like, "No, I did." And I'm like, "No, this is way too complicated. There's no way you could have done this." So they didn't give him full credit. He was happy with what he got, but it was very funny. I know there's been a few times that I've heard people that have been at like programming competitions and stuff and done things in Delphi, and the productivity has been very much higher. And actually, I have a few friends that I've talked to that were in school and took like a single computer science class. They were studying something else, and they took a single computer science class. And when it came to that final project they had to do for the class, they're like, this is kind of frustrating. I'm not getting very far. And so I said, why don't you use Delphi? And so they did. And they're like, oh my goodness, I'm switching majors. this is so much better than what I expected computer science to be about. So let's see here. Thank you, David. I've been just cruising through these questions here. So everybody should
about low-level programming, and I pointed the person back to Vic's talk earlier in DelphiCon, where he talked about getting down at gate levels and other things where you want to go very low level. There was also that question about what about assembly language programming, and I should say I spent the first 9 years of my life out of college doing nothing but real-time assembly language programming on mini and microcomputers. But these days, it seems the norm is more to do inline assembler. Most programming tools either will allow you to include assembler modules and or just do inline assembler, so you get the benefits of Delphi wrapper or C wrapper, C++ wrappers around functions and methods and things, but you can always drop down when you need to for speed or other things. Also, there's this world of GPU computing where you want to go at the GPU with CUDA and other mechanisms, and there's lots of add-on libraries to help you to do GPU computing, high-speed vector processing, for example. I don't know of anybody who's just doing straight assembler anymore, except on really older systems. But assembler is always a good thing. Usually comes early on in a college level computer science course that talks about machine organization, machine architecture, and that's where students might get introduced to register level and memory and other parts of the CPU and GPU. But inline assembler is just there in not in all, but in most programming language compilers these days.
Yes, I remember the day in 2012 that I had actually to get into a little fight with Embarcadero Brazil because I wanted to demonstrate. For the first time, Embarcadero had released a version of Delphi that could actually run on iPhone. So I wanted to demonstrate how to light up a lamp clicking on your iPhone. But to do that, I had to show some C code running in Arduino. It was 2012, and the guys were like, okay, but it's a Delphi conference. I mean, yes, and I said, okay, but we have C++. So I can actually show some basic C and say, okay, we have RAD C++. If you want, you can go there and learn a little bit of C. But you can abstract this. I'm giving the C code ready, but the Delphi part can go here and actually make the thing run. And up to 2016, actually, I went to Italy to show this with everything paid. And nowadays, I'm so glad to see that people is starting to understand that actually we can put these two things together, and IoT is the way to go. But at the end, we will still have the computer running the more complicated things. So you still have to do some low-level assembler or C, you decide, to run on your microcontrollers, and then you integrate with Delphi or C++ Builder using something RAD, both for desktop or for your mobile. So there was a question about this, and that's my point of view, let's say. And if you teach the basics for the students in the beginning, so when they get there to microcontrollers lectures, they just know how to do and they connect to their iPhone. So you don't have to teach again. So that's the idea. Use RAD.
So There are lots of suggestions about things we can do to better outreach, as Embarcadero can do. That certainly things we're trying to do more of. If you are interested, if maybe you have some contacts at universities or something like that and would like some help or to help in that regard, let me know. I'm always happy to work with you on that. It just is a lot of effort in, as I'm sure everyone here can attest to, sometimes it takes a lot of time to talk to people and get a hold of the right people, the right decision makers to help with that adoption. But we are very interested in that and love to help with that more.
And Brandon and Bertie, did you see this one from Keith at 11:43 in the Q&A? As talking about South African IT competing with traditional subjects and maybe using IoT as a hook into some of those other kinds of worlds like science, biology, and so on. I'm not sure if you see that one. It's 11:43 by Keith.
Yeah. And I think Victor did give some kind of an answer to it, because in his slides and in his previous talk, he did show some applications where they actually use Delphi to create, for instance, a monitor that monitors people with tremors. There is definitely a possibility to do that. The idea here is just to, and I think Keith, the question that he is trying to ask is, how can we integrate Delphi into other subjects such as science and biology? And the examples that Victor has shown in his initial talk of university, I mean, is quite interesting, because in the slides that he has, he also shared some video clips of small applications that's linked to engineering and things like that. So the idea here of Keith is about integration, and that could easily be done and facilitated, for example, with examples and things like that.
Yeah. So there was a question here from David about concepts like functional programming, concurrent processing, and such. So there was actually, we had a session on on functional programming with Delphi, and also we have the new PPL parallel processing library as well. And we just I did a webinar a few weeks back on Python for Delphi, and that library actually lets you leverage all the Python libraries. So he specifically called out NumPy as an example. So with Python for Delphi, you can write a Delphi application that uses NumPy, and you don't have to write any Python. You just write it all in Delphi, but consuming the NumPy library. So there, a lot of the language itself is very extensible, and the fact that you can extend Delphi in Delphi makes it so there's really not much you can't do with Delphi.
In fact, Kevin Bond has a module in the UK textbook, if I'm remembering correctly, that shows how to use Delphi and Python together. There's, again, this Delphi for Python library that was part of that two-part webinar, and I did a blog post about how to use it in C++ Builder and talk to the same components as well and to the Python libraries. You'll see a lot of people augmenting or adding to Python to do specialized programming that's not in the Python language or runtime library by creating modules. And you can, with Python for Delphi, you can go the other way around, which is you can have Python components and have Delphi apps that tie into things that Python can do really well, whether it's data science or visualizations and so on, with a rich set of libraries and scripts that are available on that side. But you can go the other way around. You can also, build add-on modules in Delphi for Python use to call into, just as people call from Python to C or other languages. So check out that two-part webinar replay and the examples, and just searching GitHub for Python 4, the number 4 Delphi.
I put a link in there there for the Python for Delphi, and then if you go into tutorials, I think he has links to the webinars from there too. So. And so here's a comment that says, Pascal is the best language for learning programming. It's verbose, clear syntax, easy to understand code that's already written. That's the most important thing, is for students to understand the code, doesn't matter what language they use. Learning Delphi, in my opinion, should be the default for any university. It would be easier for students to concentrate on understanding algorithms. I think that was kind of, because Brandon said that they went through and looked at all the languages, right, and said these are our requirements. And Delphi is like, oh, it does that. That's probably a big part of it, right? It's the readability of it.
Yeah, that was one of the aspects. The other one was the database handling. I think when there were some provinces that used Java and some provinces in South Africa that used Delphi, and they found that the questions that you would ask a student to cover in databases was a lot easier to do in Delphi than it was in Java. So it was difficult to create a uniform standardized test that goes across the curriculum in our country when we have the end of year exams, which the matrics write a universal exam that the whole country writes. So to write that type of exam that can adequately test a Java or a Delphi student, there was a discrepancy there. So I think that what spearheaded the change, but also just the nuances of Delphi and the good style that it teaches you is helped students to manage learning that programming in the beginning. So I think that's a key aspect to when they were deciding which language to focus on.
Yeah, and that's something I talk to a lot of people about in general about Delphi, is just the readability and the fact that you spend more time maintaining your code. Coding is really more about reading code than it is about writing code.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe we're almost out of time. Well, this has been really a fascinating session here. Let's go around and give everybody a chance. So it looks like David and some of the rest of you have been answering questions as we go. That's fantastic. I'm going to give everybody a chance to have some closing remarks before we wrap up. Bertie, anything you would like to add before we wrap up here?
Yes, just what me and you talked about earlier. I think there is definitely some potential now to create for high schools more app-based types of tutorials where we create apps for the mobile phone, and that will really start to kindle the enthusiasm again. And seeing David, I think the opportunity now is ripe to have a quick start. You know, like we had the quick start manuals in Delphi many months ago, quick starts for app development. 5 small applications driving the students step by step to create something that immediately will catch their attention. And I think one other thing that's nice that's already being started is maybe a repository or something where we could hook up with teachers all over the world, you know, knowing about that's using Delphi. And I think that such kind of a platform will be beneficial to everybody. For me, I will always be a Delphi supporter. And in the document, again, that David has uploaded, in our ministry has decided in 2015 that in South Africa we all move over to Delphi. Now that decision is up for review next year, 2021. And for me personally, I'll be on this. I know what I'm going to support to continue for the next 5 years. So I'm quite positive. And it's just good to see what Victory is doing and what's happening in Brazil. Even in Russia, it's quite encouraging. And I think we've got a great future. Now, just to say, we're kindling kids. If we're working with kids, we want them to go and study further. And I think that is the predominant focus that we have on high school level, is to have them go out there, become part of the larger problem-solving community out there.
Yeah, fantastic. I just shared a link also to Brandon, his YouTube channel, Mr. Long IT and Cat, that has, gosh, you probably have a few hundred videos on here that are just little short lessons in using Delphi and stuff. So highly recommended there. Brandon, any comments before we close up here?
I think one aspect that people often forget about, we spoke about when you're designing the console, why I prefer having a graphical user interface, be able to design that for kids, is that there's an element to children where they want to be creative. And we have the mathematical code aspect and the logic that runs in the background, but there's still an outlet for students to be able to be creative in the design of how the program looks. And I think we mustn't negate that. There are very creative students, and seeing that visual part is also a part of encouraging them to see and create programs that are visually pretty. Just being able to make something that looks nice and creating that, you can't get that from the console necessarily. So that just helps kindle, like really get that that spark for students when they want to be creative. So let's not negate the creativity part, and that's why it's important to use tools like Delphi.
That's a really good point. That is a really, really good point. Victory.
Yes, talking about creative and students in the early years of the university, when they arrived with age 16, 17. I entered at the university, I had 17 years old to study electrical engineering. So as a teacher, I actually, the last year when I was teaching 5 years ago, I actually had this first semester where the students were receiving a remote controlled car. And actually the final work for the semester was to remove the remote control and actually do a program to control it. So, I mean, you can only do that if you have the RAD Studio in your hands or something as powerful as RAD Studio, because then you can come with Arduino that abstracts all the electronics. That was a problem back in my years when I was studying. You had to do all the soldering, all the welding and stuff. Nowadays, you just put plate over plate and you have some Arduino running Wi-Fi, communicating via Wi-Fi with your software running in your desktop, and you can do that very quickly and very easily. And then you demonstrate what Brendan just said. I mean, you just give some sparkling edge to the student and say, oh, I can do that. And that's the point. That was the point that I tried to bring to you guys, and I ask you guys out there to question this worldwide. I mean, that's not a matter on teaching the basics. That's the matter on how we do that to make the students actually smile and get like fantastic results. This is the thing. Yeah. We have to make them go crazy at the first years of the university. And we can do that with C++ and Delphi. You just choose it. If the university is resistant to Delphi, okay, let's go through C++ Builder, because then they cannot argue. They will say, okay, are you not using Arduino to teach your students microcontrollers? So, I mean, we are introducing C++ and the HAD Studio. So the numbers we show in Brazil in my slides are actually HAD Studio licenses, not only Delphi. So then they choose in between one or another. We are free, but we empower the students. That's my fight.
Fantastic. That's a great point. And David, great seeing you again. I need to get my tie-dye shirt. Forgot to wear that today.
Bring a little color to the event, you know. Every day, tie-dye every day. That'll just keep me going forever. I wanted to just quickly mention that for some examples of solutions focused with Delphi, if you go to Get It Package Manager from the IDE and choose the industry templates category, you'll see the field services demo, the hospitality demo, and the sort of automated nurses station, medical office of tomorrow examples, which are full examples that you can download. You know, and there's nothing like reading through and looking through examples of real working applications that have both a client side, a website, a server side, maybe a middle tier, and talk to databases. You can see those, and you know, having more of those kind of template applications that are targeted at different types of industries can be very good learning tools as well. Grady Booch always said that we need to spend a little bit of our time reading code, reading source code, and learning from systems. And that's why the Computer History Museum in California has a whole software archive, including the original source code, for example, for VisiCalc and for Mac Paint and Mac Draw, so that people can look at what some of those systems were built as well. But then having real working examples that you can just download in the IDE through Get It, and then explore and play with them. And maybe there's people out there that have some examples for different types of businesses and industries that could be, in a sense, templatized, maybe any secrets taken out of them or whatever, and contact Jim and others to get those put into Get It, so people can just, and students and teachers can just grab them as examples of something more than just simple little applications, but real working applications with REST backends and so on, as you move up beyond the basics of programming. So just wanted to mention those were available, as well as all the great blogs. And then we had Alistair Christie, I think, earlier in DelphiCon with his, his Learning Delphi TV. I don't know what he's up to now. I think Brandon, maybe you're in a struggle between New Zealand and South Africa on the Southern Hemisphere side of how many different video lessons to teach all sorts of great things that you can do in Delphi. But all of these are good resources, and I think maybe Learn Delphi points to a bunch of this as well. So there's lots of great resources. Now I think it's packaging some of this together and mapping it into the requirements of courses, classes, curriculums, and so on would be a good next effort as well.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it's still fun to program. I'm semi-retired, but I spend every day programming and learning more in my lifelong quest for learning how to be a better programmer. So I'm still having fun here now in Southern Oregon, where the sun is out today for a change. Yeah.
Whoa. So
I call it sun breaks up here. You get sun breaks in between the rain. So
yeah, I lived in Seattle for a while, and that the weather report would be chance of sun today. So I just saw Landerson's on from Brazil. He does a lot of great work down there in Brazil on education. So thank you, Landerson, for your efforts there. And I shared the link to Mr. Long's IT channel, and I looked it up. He has 231 videos on there. Over 700,000 video views. So that is a lot of Delphi education. Thank you for that, Brandon. Brandon, that's awesome. And then, as David mentioned, Alistair Christie's LearnDelphi.tv is available on YouTube as well. He has 214 YouTube videos, and then he probably has another 100 videos that are available for pay as well on his website that you can download. Maybe not 100, but quite a few that you can download from there. So those are two great resources, and most of them are pointed to from LearnDelphi.org, and we're always looking to improve on there as well. So thank you so much to our panelists and for everybody else for being part of this session. This was fantastic. A few people commented that they loved that they kicked off ended this DelphiCon with this great conversation about making the future better, and I think that is fantastic. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
And definitely we'll be looking to have more conversations with you all and anybody else that would like to talk about how we can make education better and what we can do to collaborate. I'm always happy to help collaborate with that and work together on those sorts of things. So thank you. And thanks for being part of DelphiCon.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.